what this is the core of what YouTube is, which is amateur or user-generated content, which is a whole new sort of issue facing sort of the media and entertainment and information industries. Because what happens if people would rather watch what their peers made instead of what the Hollywood producer made?
Imagine that.
Imagine that. And there's some really interesting things that are going on around this.
So, and this is the core of the rub that Stephen and I are currently sort of having a very slow speed knockdown drag at about this, which is that if I give you as an audience, and this is an individual question now, let's assume that we're going to sort of forget the mass media and all their offerings in some sense, right? But I'm going to give you a great big menu of offerings, say 1 million different things that you could watch, all right? Are you all going to gravitate to things that have high production values, or are you going to gravitate to things that are personally meaningful? Now I think, and I think that the audience is already voting with their feet, that in fact you'll always vote for something that's more meaningful over something that has higher production value.
But my entire argument has nothing to do with production value.
I know.
It's about an artist should be able to support themselves doing their art. And in the
Do you think Steve Frank's not supporting himself doing this right now?
No, but when you have something like YouTube going out, where the expectation of the content is there, the reality of these people being able to make a living doing what they're doing is very, very slim. And what we do, and I just say this for argument's sake, what we do when we flood the information and entertainment channels with all this amateur stuff is completely erase the ability for somebody to have the ability to dedicate their life and their brain and their time to getting better and better at what they do, because they got to hold a day job while they're doing it.
So I guess you should probably watch, say, Frank's progress from March until now, because he's gotten a lot better at what he's doing. It's an act of love. It may also be an act of self-promotion, and it's a very wise one, I think, on this part. And he may, in fact, be making some money from his ads. But in fact, I think that the drive of the amateur is so strong that money is simply not an issue for them.
I totally agree, but everybody in this room is more than likely a practitioner of some media art, and therefore expects to have a career in some form doing it.
But do you think that they understand that they're now fighting against an entire tsunami of amateurs?
Well, we're hoping to sort of educate and inform people that that is exactly what the sort of fight is being fought right now.
Is there not also an argument that everybody has to start somewhere? So even if you've got thousands of people beginning their career making money or not, if it's here doing this, isn't that a really good
Yeah, but what he's
thing?
worried about is that by the time they climb the ladder, that there's no structure to support them, because the amateurs have completely overrun the system.
You'll start at the bottom and stay on the bottom.
Well, in other words, rather than being
by
a pyramid with some voices at the top and a lot of people sort of struggling at the bottom to get recognized, what I think is actually happening now is that that base is broadening so much and so rapidly right now that the rest of this sort of pyramid just sort of falls down on it, because there's now so many viewing choices that are so specific for so many audiences. And this is, I mean, both of us accept the validity of the other's position, and neither of us knows what to do about it, because I work with professional filmmakers all the time, and they say, oh, what's going on? We don't know if, as professionals, you'll necessarily have what we think of as the current industry.
Well, you know,
in 10 years' time.
One thing I will say for user-generated media, because I am actually a big fan of that medium per se. I just think that those who are huge proponents never ever talk about, you know, how are we going to make careers as sort of artists doing it. But one of the interesting things is I think that as countries such as Canada, our regulatory and our technological ability to have control over what we see, and therefore to ensure that there are Canadian voices for Canadian audiences, is going to disappear. And we are just going to be subsumed by larger media empires. And maybe in 10 years from now, the only Canadian content you will be able to access, more or less, will be user-generated content, whether or not somebody makes any money.
But I mean, it's interesting, because the thing is that YouTube is the monolith. It's not NBC. You're not going to sort of be subsumed by American programming per se, right?
No, a globalized, make it once, sell it to many way at looking at the world.
A couple of points. One, Steve, don't ignore companies like Rever, which are able to provide a business model now for amateur content, and there's Grouper and a handful of others that are doing that. And the second point is Bill C-60.
Okay, hold on a second. What's the adoption rate of Rever versus YouTube? Is it about 100 to 1?
Well, Rever isn't a destination site. Rever is a site where you upload your video to Rever, they process it, basically put a tag at the end of it.
I know how Rever works, but I'm just saying that in terms of their penetration right now, and in terms of their mindshare penetration, I think that horse has already left the barn. I mean, you can point to it and say, yes, this is possibly a way that the artist could realize revenue off of it, but if everyone's already going to YouTube...
But if your argument for these other companies was they're starting out without a revenue model, and the revenue model develops...
Yeah, but they're starting off as, in a lot of ways, as commercial enterprises and not as someone editing their prom together to, you know, some bad power ballad.
God forbid.
Okay, I'm sorry. So what was your second point?
The second point was just Bill C-60, which is the new Canadian Copyright Act, which is modeled on the U.S. DMCA.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, well, it's going to be one of the first orders of business in the new Parliament, and it has some real chilling effects on what we're going to be able to do. And no one seems to be paying any attention to it, and it could very easily be passed without us.
I'm actually really, really, really happy with draconian copyright acts because, let me explain why. Because what it's doing is it's forcing more work into the commons space. What will happen is is that you will want to be able to work with material, well, you're going to go to the commons, either the Creative Commons or stuff that's in the public domain for that material, because there are such draconian penalties or draconian contracts associated with using this that Disney doesn't understand. Again, they're cutting off their own oxygen supply. I wasn't kidding when I said the more something is shared, the more valuable it becomes. All right. When you pass a draconian copyright act, yes, sure, it provides a clearer channel for them to be able to, beat off all comers to their copyright material, but it also makes it less valuable. They haven't really got that part of the story yet.
I just wanted to make a comment rather than a question, and that is when you're saying about the amateurs being a tsunami wave. Just to kind of think outside the box, there's one avenue of success with that might be surfing the wave rather than trying to somehow have your feet on the ground.
Yeah.
But my position is not an indictment of user-generated content. It's just an indication of a topic that people rarely talk about.
Well, no, it's about how do you as a professional producer survive in a tsunami of content. And this, ladies and gentlemen, this is the elephant in this living room. I mean, this is why we're having this argument, because we hope by sort of staking out these positions that we're going to try to figure this out. Rever is possibly a solution, although Rever's adoption is so low right now. If YouTube had come to the table with something like that...
Very successful stories.
Yeah, I agree. But if YouTube had come to the table with something like that, or YouTube and Rever merge or something like that, then that might be a framework for both of them. It could easily be. Part of the thing that made YouTube work was that it was so viral and so anarchic. And if they start reining that in, they could lose the wind in their sails.